And we can start. So where we off last time, we had our reference, and we took our reference and we put it in Maya, and we got all that done. And then we started blocking out the character using very simple shapes that we just modified in simple ways to get the correct size and proportions of the character. We used several different tools whilst doing this, all stuff that was covered in the introduction video anyway, but we used a lot of them through this example and that. So what am I gonna do next? This is just gonna be me going through it how I would go through it. So see what I'm doing and see how I'm doing it, and hopefully that will be very clear. This stage is gonna be the detailing stage. So I have my whole block out, I have it the right shape and size, and I'm gonna start going through each and every component and making it exactly with the details that I want to have. And you'll see which details I put in, which details I leave out, and all of that stuff. So you'll see what I'm doing and you'll see the logic I'm using whilst working on this. Now the first thing I want to do is actually clear this up, because my outliner here, this button over here, this is everything that's in my scene, and right now it's very messy because there's a bunch of random stuff in there. None of it has names, none of it's clear. And before I do that, I'm gonna go up here to Edit, Delete All by Type, History, and that's gonna delete any of the past things that I've done to this model so that it doesn't kind of create errors or crashes. Then I'm going to grab this whole thing and I'm gonna group it. And this is gonna delete these groups as well because they're empty now, or rather it's gonna leave them empty because there was stuff inside them before, right? Now we're gonna grab these groups, delete them, we're gonna grab this and we're gonna call this robo, or just call it blockout underscore robo. We'll just call it robo, or bot, that sounds better. There, beautiful. Right, and now we have this list of just objects. That's everything that this guy's made of. And I'm going to start continuously grouping those as well. So we grab this, and this is a leg. We call this leg A. You grab these. And you just go through the whole thing and you group, and you essentially organize your scene. Because you need to be able to see what you're doing. You need to be able to see what kind of objects you have in your scene. And this guy is made of loads of little components. So for ones that are made up of stuff, I'm not going to go through and be like hinge 1, hinge 2, hinge 3. I'm not going to go that far. But for I'm just going to keep them in groups since there are so many of them. So this is head. Actually, this would go in the head as well, I think. And then we have this part that is body, Control G, body. And here we have antenna A and antenna B. Antenna B. Okay, so what's this stuff? Oh, these are the things on the butt. And what's the other one? Why is there 3? Maybe one of them is like duplicated. Yeah, one of them is duplicated. There we go. And these will go on the body as well. We'll put these in the body. Right. As I'm going through this, if you guys have any questions or like, oh wait, how did you do that? Just interrupt me. Not too often, of course, if you see that I'm like super in flow, or if I've just been interrupted multiple times. Just interject and be like, by the way, how did you do this? And that will be completely fine. Alright, so now we're going to duplicate this block out with Control D. We're going to hide the original by clicking it and pressing H. And then we're going to go here and we're going to call this detailing underscore bot. And now we've organized our scene. We have a duplicate, we have all of our different parts, and we can start working on them individually. I think I'm going to start with the head, because that's kind of a really central characteristic part of the character, and I want to work on it for that reason. So I can actually even hide the rest of these, and specifically focus on the head. I'm not too worried about it at the moment though, so just keep them in. So let's look at it from the front and see what we're dealing with. So there's a lot of inside details in this thing, but those are all things that I'm actually not going to put in here. I'm just going to kind of try and figure out what the main different shapes are for this thing. And I think the top and the bottom part are actually separate, and even this middle bit is a little bit separate. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to grab this asset, I'm going to insert edge loops so that I can essentially cut this thing into those kinds of pieces. And I can use this cut tool over here with a knife as well. And I'm just going to start working into this thing. You can see how I'm going to be doing that. And actually, let me turn on my symmetry. World X, there we go. Cut in here to here. That's going to go to there, and that's going to cut it like that. And then I think I would like another one down here. Is there something wrong here? Let's see.
Hi, sorry, can you share how you did the symmetry?
Symmetry is here at the top, right here. So you click this button, and you have World X, and that's your symmetry, right?
Okay, thank you.
And then I'm gonna come in here, and I'm just gonna cut. I'm gonna connect these sections, they're over here. And then I'm gonna delete this middle section that's gonna be a gap. And delete these sections as well. So let's see what's happening here. Is there anything that's not right? I think it's okay. Okay. And then we're going to delete these middle bits as well, because we want the face to be on there. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do a bit of a kind of a Lego mask almost, where there's this little black head inside, and outside is just the helmet. I'm also going to grab these bits and just start cutting into kind of the shape I want this to have. And this middle bit kind of goes out to here, cuts down, and comes back like this. It's a weird shape, but I'm gonna go with it for now and see whether we can make it work, because right now it's actually narrower than I want it to be. Also, I'm gonna mute this thing because I need to mute this. And I think here this needs to be a little wider. Let's ungrab the ones at the bottom because it looks kind of like a little helmet at the moment, and I need this to be there. Let's undo our symmetry so that our pivot point goes back to the middle. Make this come out a little more. And grab these like this, put them up. Put symmetry back on. I'm going to delete this bottom bit because as you could see, it's a bit more like a shell or a helmet rather than an actual box. And you have this stylization coming down here. It's like this interesting shape. So I'm going to pull that down and then try and make that make more sense as going around this side. Is there anything broken right now? Here we want this to be a quad, 4-sided rather than 5. And this I'm just going to clean it up like this for now. Or actually, let's clean it up like this for now. There we go. And this one's totally crazy, so I'm just going to fix this as well, because it's a bit intense. Make this go across. Is there anything that's not making sense as to what I'm doing or why I'm doing right now? Okay. So we're starting to have the shape of this head here. It is a bit bumpy and wacky in the concept, but I'm just going to ignore that part for now. And what I'm going to do now is something I showed you guys before. I'm going to essentially give it some thickness. So I'm going to extrude the whole object and just push it in like this. I'm going to do that. And then you can see it's actually reversed. So I need to go to Mesh Display, Reverse. to bring it back to normal. And then we have kind of a thickness shape to this thing, to this little robot. I want it to have a head, of course, on the inside, and I don't actually want it to... I'll show you why later on, why I don't want to have this inner bit. I'll leave it for now, but in the future there'll be something we'll do with that. Now, I want it to have the little head that's going to be the face in the middle. And for that, I'm just going to make a little cylinder. It doesn't have to be very high resolution. And we're going to do this. And then the head needs to reach just to where it needs to be. So not go beyond that little thing there. And this should be okay. Let's smooth it out. Soften edge. And now we have this little head inside, which is also nice. We can make adjustments and all of that stuff as well. And it's essentially just looking at the details of the asset that you've chosen to make and making those details. That's literally all that this stage is. There's nothing more complicated about it. That's all that we're doing. We're just trying to get the details that are from the asset, but we're trying to segment it into pieces that make sense. Now, I could have kept this as one solid thing, but I could see that there was this gap here between them where I could see the face. These here don't really have gaps, they're just kind of surface details. And to be honest, you could have left this as a surface detail as well, and I might adjust it later and actually make them come together. But for now, it's okay. I'm just gonna add a little bit of bevels here to get these rounded shapes going. And that means that actually this I'm gonna pull up so it's sharp. And then up here, I'm gonna click the bevel button. It's going to bevel it. And as I always say, all of these functions are covered in the introduction to my video, which, you know, last year's first year, some of them were telling me they had to watch several times because they kept noticing stuff that I had gone over, but they weren't really understanding yet. And then they'd watch it again and be like, oh, this is what this is. So it is possible that you might have to rewatch it if I'm doing stuff that you're like, how do you do that? It's all covered in there. It's just quite a dense video with a lot of information. This thing needs to be a little thicker. I'm looking at the object here and then focusing on it here. This is a bit smaller. And this is okay. This, try to get the right shape. Down here, this is pretty sharp. This here is a little bit rounded, so I'm going to actually bevel this inner edge like this, and it's actually going to give it a roundness if I add a segment here. Get the little window pop up for your bevels, add a little segment, and now it's going to make it round like this. And up here I'm going to leave this. I don't want to work on these details at the moment, although I could very easily just do this and then just pull these faces up a little bit, and now we've got that shape that you have in that part. I am going to, after that though, just let's take a look at this object on its own. Yeah, so these need to be connected. And here, these are just going to be like that, and that's going to make this little sharp bit, which I don't like. It's going to make it look quite sharp, so I'm going to add a edge loop here so that I can connect this face to this face. And now it doesn't have anything crazy. Or even actually, let's do it like this. And then it's going to go across. How does that look? Okay, that's not giving us any weird look, so we're going to keep that, and let's get rid of these edges because they don't do anything. And you can see that I have a lot of these like extra edge loops now that aren't doing anything. There's no detail in them. I always tell students that like if you have details and edges which do not do anything, deleting them does not change the shape in any way, then get rid of them. So like if I delete this edge loop, the shape has changed. There's something missing, you know. If I delete this edge loop, the shape has changed. But if I delete this one, nothing happens. It's an extra, we don't need it. Except up here, which is why I'm going to have to figure out how to do this little bit because we need to have four-sided stuff all the time. So this is something that I'm going to clean later on. So whilst you're doing your detailing, it can be messy. You can let it be a little messy and have a few lines that are extras that you don't need to worry about yet. But later on, we're going to have to clear it up. That's just something that's going to have to happen. Also here, I think the head needs to be a little lower because it's poking through the helmet. Okay, so these top sections, they're pretty straightforward. I'm not going to mess with them right now. There's nothing really I want to do with them. I'm just going to leave them. This part here, if I wanted to, I could add like this middle loop that's doing that stuff. But for now, I'm just going to leave it. And I'm just going to look at how deep it goes. And it goes pretty deep. So I'm going to just pull it in a little bit. Doesn't really make much of a difference. If I wanted to, I could make it a little less sharp, and even these ones, to be honest, because they are quite sharp. So what we could do is we could just bevel them a tiny fraction, like a very tiny fraction, like 0.05, and that's going to give us a little bit of a bevel, which even if we smooth, is going to just make it look a little bit less sharp and computery, right? This is a much smoother shape than this one because this one's very sharp and has this aliasing and complete change here. So we could smooth these out as well if we wanted to. I'm only going to work on one side because I'm going to mirror it afterwards. So let's do that. Let's do a little bit of 0.05. And then if we wanted to, we could smooth it as well, which I think I'm going to do just to give it a smoother look. Like that. And the case is that, like in industry, if you're working on a lot of objects that are very sharp and have a lot of sharp edges, occasionally it's useful to add a little bit of softened edge, a bevel with a softened edge to make it look a little bit less computery. Not always, but an occasion. Now let me look at it from the front because I want to see what's happening here. Let me hide this temporarily on and off. Yeah, so I think this whole section, I'm looking that it's okay. I'm looking that this is pretty high. I want this to connect in the right place, but I think it's fine for now. Let's move on to the antenna. Now, as you can see, the antenna has a lot of lines going across it, and it doesn't need that many to look round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select every other one because I want to delete them. And then I'm going to hold Control and right click and go to Edge Loop Utilities in the bottom here and to Edge Loop. And that's going to select it going all the way up like that. And I can do Control Delete. And now it's half the resolution, but looks pretty much exactly the same. And another way to do that, if you didn't want to do it that way, is you could just double click each one. And I was just saving myself clicks by just clicking one at a time. You can do it that way as well. So this is slightly lower resolution now because it didn't need to be that high. This is very sharp, but I think I want to keep it sharp. And I'm going to keep it sharp for now. But this little zigzag we don't have yet. So let's look at the asset from here. And we're going to put in edge loops at each zig, essentially. And so here's something I want to do. I want to make this flat, but it's going to change kind of the angle. You see how it's changing the width and the angle of the actual antenna? And I don't want it to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here in my modeling palette, and here where it says transform constraint, I'm going to change it to surface slide. And again, this is stuff that we've covered in previous tutorial in the video. But I'm just going to change the surface slide. So now whatever I do, these edges are always going to try and retain the same surface so that it doesn't change the actual shape. It's just going to move them on the surface. So let's insert a few more. We need one here. We can flatten that. And now that these two are flattened, everything in between should work fine. Let's put an edge loop for each zig and zag. And now we want to turn off this surface because we want to be able to move stuff away from the shape and change the shape. We can do stuff like this. And here, I'm actually going to insert another one. Stick it in here because we do have a little bit of a break here for the antenna. And we just want to make sure they're the right size. So I'm going to just expand this a little bit. This one as well. This one is fine here. This one needs to be a little thinner. And they don't have to be perfect because these are drawings. At the end of the day, they're not mathematical, you know, grids and super accurate, you know, kind of things you need to follow by the note. But we do want to make it kind of authentic before we start messing around with it. So we have this antenna that's like this now. And I can imagine that it's kind of bending back a little bit. And I will show you guys how to do that in a little bit. I'm going to leave it for now, but I will show you how to do that. Now here you have this surface detail here. There's no reason for me to kind of put that in, so I'm just going to leave it for now and just keep this antenna as is. I think maybe I could make this side a little bit smaller so that it has that kind of going into it look. And the same with this one, a little bit smaller. And that should look alright. And those are going to go on the other side as well. Now, how can I make this curve a little bit, this whole kind of antenna? So I want this to just kind of point backward a little bit. There's a few different ways we could do it. I could just group it. So I can press, grab the antenna group. And I could just kind of make sure our pivot point is right in the center, like this. And then I could kind of just rotate it down a bit, and I could kind of deselect this part and just group these parts as well and rotate them in a bit. I could do that. Or I'm going to grab the whole antenna group and duplicate it and hide it because I want to back up in case I screw something up with the first one. So I'm going to grab this one, grab these first three pieces without the head piece and group them as well. And I'm actually, instead of grouping them actually, I'm going to grab them, these ones you can see, and I'm going to go mesh, combine. And that's going to combine them into one object. Now they're all just one object, right? So I'm going to edit, delete by type history because we want to get rid of all this history that we've just had. So you can see like here we have delete edge, split ring, tweak, and then we have unite, which is combined. And we wanted to delete all of that information saying we did in the past because it can give us errors in the future if it piles up too much. And what we can do now that we have it as one single object, we can give it a deformer. What's a deformer? Let's go into here, the deform menu. And this has a lot of different things you can do. Some of it is for VFX and movies and stuff, but we don't need that. All we need is this thing here called lattice. And lattice is a deformer which gives the object these kind of boxes around it. You can change how many there is and all that stuff, but it gives you these boxes and you can grab the lattice point. So I'm holding right click, lattice point, grab these, and by moving them, it moves the object by that much. And you can also allow a blending. But for now, let me just clarify. Let's grab these lattice points. And we can kind of move them in a kind of slightly bent way to make a bending appear. And we can move them like in this direction as well, bit by bit. But you see it's a little bit fiddly doing it like this and doing it bit by bit, bit by bit. So what I'm going to do, instead of doing it bit by bit, I'm going to turn on soft selection by pressing B, remember? So when you press on B, you get this soft selection thing that allows you to softly move stuff. and it turns on the soft selections menu, and I can kind of just rotate and turn this and put it in the direction that I want it to be. And when I then grab this that I've been changing, because when I delete these, it's gonna go back to normal. When I delete these boxes that I'm using, right? This box here, when I delete it, goes back to normal. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab that one that I just made, Control D to duplicate it, and then I can grab these and just delete the old ones, and I'm left with the one I edited. And now it looks a little bit more cartoony. It doesn't match that entirely, but it looks a lot more cartoony and it looks a lot more interesting. And I still have my original in case for whatever reason I want to go back to it. So I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to call it antenna A underscore backup. So I'm going to leave that there. But this is the antenna that I'm going to use now. So I'm going to grab this and call it edited and stick it in the antenna group. Now my antenna group has that fancy antenna. I can then delete antenna B, grab the antenna A, and I can mirror it over using the mirror tool. But for some reason it doesn't want to. Why is that? Okay, let's just duplicate it then. Do X minus 1. This needs to be in the center. There we go. Now we have those two antennas, and it's looking much more cool. Let me hide this for a bit because it's quite white and hard to see. And let me turn on our smoother edges. With this button, you can make the edges a lot smoother. So if I turn that off, you can see there's this little jaggedness happening here. Turn it on, becomes smooth. And also with this button, we can turn on the simulated shadows. So you can see this is starting to look a lot more detailed and a lot more like the thing that we're actually going to have at the end, which is really useful, which is really nice. Now let's bring back our kind of image here. We have our antenna B, very good. That here, and we have our backup, excellent. And this is our face, isn't it? Face. We'll put that into the head. Now our head has that. Down here, I just want to do this part here, this kind of plate. It's already kind of okay. Turn off soft selection. But I want this to be softened. So I want it to be smooth. And there's not really much else I want to do to it, except I want to have it end in a curve. So if I grab this and just look at it, this is what it looks like right now. And that connects to the head, doesn't it? So I want that to actually kind of reach into the head that we have here in a curve. So what would we do? Should I just leave it? I think I might just leave it, you know? Or just leave it. The head, is that curved? Maybe. I think I'll leave it for now. I will leave it. And I think actually because this is a very sharp side and I want the head to be kind of a smooth thing, I'll add a bevel here, very minor bevel. .1 and add a segment so it's rounded, and grab all of these. To edge loop utilities, to edge loop, mesh display, soften edge. Now we have a smooth head again. Okay, so the head is pretty much done in terms of detail. The detail for the head is kind of pretty much done. And I would now move on to the rest of it and start putting in the details. And I think the only one I kind of want to show you guys is this one here and how I would do this one with these little engravings. Although honestly, this is a very surface detail, so I probably wouldn't put this one in necessarily. This one I would separate into two pieces possibly and put another piece inside, kind of similar to what I did for the head. So I think I would do that as well. And these would be interesting to show because essentially I would be making them a little bit wider. I would be beveling them on both sides to make them a little rounder like here. So I'd put 0.1, That's too little. Let's do a little bit like this. Add a segment so that they're rounded, but reduce the depth so it's not quite so sharp. And then I can grab all of these. And in here, excuse me, you can see that they have these bolts. So what I'll essentially have to do is put in bolts that stick in here. And I will do that with a cylinder again that I would put in position here. So I'm holding V on the keyboard and snapping it to this point here, the middle point, right? Because I want it to be right in the middle. And I can snap it to the center again. And I just make it much smaller, rotate it, and we can put it in. And those bolts are kind of rounded as well. They're also lower resolution, so we want to make them a little bit lower than 20. Put them like to 12 or something. And we can then do what we did before, which is deleting these faces, right? Deleting these cap faces, and then bridging them together. So we can either do that, let's select this and just see it alone. We can do that one by one, bridge, bridge, grab all of that, bridge. And I'm not clicking bridge every time, because if I press the letter G on my keyboard without anything else, it's going to redo the last thing that I did. So I can click G, it's going to redo, G, it's going to redo. Just going to click it that time. Or we could just double click all of them, unclick the ones that we're not going to do, and then just click bridge, and it's going to do all of them at the same time. Okay, so now we have this shape in the middle. We want to smooth it. Let's just play soft edge. And in the middle here, I'm going to just add a couple of lines. And then this, we can squeeze in. And we've got this kind of bolt sticking out on the side. This isn't perfect. It's not exactly how I would do it, because I want it to actually stick out in a round sort of way. But it is still kind of serves the purpose if we want to have a very 3D kind of object visible as the bolt on here. You can grab these pieces, move them out a little bit, grab these pieces, move them out a little bit so it's a little bit rounded. And in the middle here, we can sharpen all of these pieces to make them look more hardened, to make them look sharper and more like they're supposed to. I think just these I want to push back as well. And now we have this kind of rounded bolt sticking out of the arm, right? But I'm not gonna go through the whole arm right now. I'm gonna pause, I'm gonna stop for a moment. I'm gonna ask you guys whether you have any questions. Is that all making sense? Etc, etc. It does look a bit like Magneto's helmet. How are you guys doing? Is it making sense so far? Is there any issues? Do you understand what we're doing at the moment?
Do we will have a recording video on a Canvas or on Discord so we could rewatch it again to remember everything?
Yeah, it is recording right now, and it seems to be picking up my wow, so it should, you will have a rewatch available that's gonna go on YouTube. Alright, just one more person typing, and we're gonna see what that is. So the block work needs to be done by now. You need to do the block work before you do your detailing. Yes, the block work will need to be done before you do your detailing. Depending on how complex your object is, I know that your block work might take you longer or less. So I do understand that. But yeah, try and get through your block out. It does have to be quite simple. You just need the right shape and size, roughly, and you can go through it. Yep.
I've done the block out and I've begun doing the details, like rounding off, like, because I'm doing the axe, so I've done like cuts into it and bevels, so from the block out.
Yeah.
So from then, once we've completed that, do we then move on to eventually texturing, or is that in coming weeks?
So after that, what we're going to have to do is UVing and texturing. So what we can do is after this session, you can send me a picture of your asset. I can give you feedback, and depending on the complexity of the asset and the quality, I might tell you to fix some details or add some details. I might tell you to add another simple asset in the scene so it's adds to the complexity of the work, or I might tell you that you can probably move on depending on what stage your asset is at.
I haven't finished it yet. I've just got to do the straps and the bolts of the axe handle, and then it's finished. But that could take me a bit longer. So
I mean, that's fine. When your assets do get finished, you'll have me or Sawyer or Holly to give you feedback on them and see whether you can.
yeah, 'cause I had
The
help.
details.
I had help from Sawyer yesterday. So I came in early, and he helped me with a little bit of it and different strategies.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. You guys see Sawyer walking around, do nab him when you're doing your details if you're struggling with figuring out how to do certain details. And Holly as well. Right, so block on needs to be on that. So your object had like writing text on it. Would you leave that for when your model is done and you texture, or just when the texture might? Right. So now to answer, yes, you would leave it for when it's texturing. Now to answer that question, I'm going to send you guys some videos from last year after this session, which is going to show you what we're going to be doing when we start texturing and what the result of texturing is going to be, so that you better understand what details you need and what details you don't. Without that understanding, without that video where you see the textures and you see what they do, it's going to be really hard for you guys to figure out what details you need and what details you don't. I'm going to do something very quickly, which is, let me save this. I'm just going to show you really quickly what we're going to do with UVing, which is, and I'm going to do it on, what part should I use? Let's use, yeah, let's just grab the face. It doesn't matter. Let's grab the body. Fine, let's do the body. So when we finish our detailing of the object, what we're going to do is we're going to start UVing. Now, don't worry too much if you're not going to get what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. Don't worry about that yet. We're going to get to that properly after you guys do your detailing. I just want you to generally see what it is that's happening to this object right now. The object has what's called UVs, and UVs are a flat representation of the model. It's like the model but flattened out, right? And UVs can be like deleted. An object can have no UVs, or it can have, its UVs like made up of loads of different sections, or it can have some that are missing. But essentially a UV is kind of like the origami flattened out, or if you guys ever did maths in school where you had to make a box out of paper, imagine ungluing those kind of flaps and flattening the net of the box on the floor. That's essentially what a UV is. A UV is just your model cut up and flattened out. Why is that important? Because when you make a UV, and this is not how I would make them, this is just an automatic one you can generate. It's not great, but it serves the purpose of what I'm trying to explain to you guys. When you have a 2D representation of your model, when you start adding color to the object, this is what the color actually goes on, right? There are programs out there where you have your 3D object and you paint on it literally on the object. Yes, there is, but what's actually happening on a technological level is information, whether it's color or stuff that tell the model to look shiny or stuff that tell the model to glow and have light, whatever it is, that's going on the 2D flat picture, right? So remember in maths when you were making a paper cube, Paper cube. You remember in maths when you were making like a paper cube like this, right? And you were then like putting it together and all that stuff. So what did you do if you wanted to draw on it or write on it? You drew on it when it was flat. You didn't make the cube and then draw on it. And if you did, it looked bad, right? So this is essentially what this program is, what the 3D programs are going to be doing. They're going to be putting information on this flat piece of the model, which is then transferred to the actual 3D model. So in a game, the player never sees this 2D stuff. This is just information in the computer, right? The player never sees that. But that's what's saved and then thrown onto this 3D version. And how can I exemplify that? How can I explain that to you? Well, let me just grab these things. And let me just go and take them out of here. And as I said, don't worry about how I'm doing what I'm doing. I just want you to understand the concept that I'm trying to put across. We're going to cover this properly later. I just want you to understand the concept, right? Let me put this picture on the desk. So I've gotten a picture of this, right? And I've put it on the desktop. My desktop, which is kind of, what is all this stuff? My desktop, which is kind of quite clean now, since you've last seen it, probably. I'm going to open up Photoshop. What are you? Explorer 11? Jesus. Ask me later. Goodbye. Thank you. I don't know what that was, guys. Let's open up a new file in Photoshop. I'll make it the same size as the picture that I just made. And we're going to take that picture that we just made. We're going to throw it in here. And you can see that it's literally put that 2D representation of the model in the separate window, which you don't need to worry about yet. In the separate window that we have the 2D representation of this model. We've put that into Photoshop. And now I'm literally just going to draw on here. And I'm going to write something. Hi. Put a tick here, put a cross here, put a circle here, put a triangle here. And I'm going to then hide the grid itself, and we're just going to have this color, right? This color information. I'm going to save this on desktop as a PNG for now. And now in here, in my object, when I go to its I'm gonna give it a little material here, and I keep reminding you guys not to worry about how this is happening because I really don't want to overwhelm you, but I want you to understand what's happening. So what I did is I took that object, that picture that I just made. See this picture of the little shapes, and I put it on. I applied it to the 3D object, and what it did is it's looking at the UVs that we created, this 3D representation, and it's applying the color to that object, right? And you can tell that if I actually move these UVs, it's actually gonna change what's visible. So you can literally understand how this is a 2D representation which applies the color information to that object. Now, to clarify, we are not going to be drawing in Photoshop on the UVs. We're not going to be doing that. And we are not just going to be using color and painting these and having them look like weird little, 1998 3D games that have really bad surface information and just some kind of color put on it and really bad shadows. We're not going to be doing that. But I want you to understand that we're creating a 3D object. We are then detailing it, making sure it has good details. We're then going to essentially be creating these 2D representation, these nets on it so that it can be colored very efficiently. And then we're going to use really great programs to make this 3D object have all sorts of different information on its surface. So there's going to be color, there's going to be property information of whether it's metallic or not. There's going to be how shiny it is and all that stuff. So we're going to go through that whole process. And before that, we need to detail our whole object so it's finished. And then we're going to need to make these 2D representations. And then we're going to be going straight into Substance Painter, and we're going to be doing some really, really cool stuff, right? So we are going to get to that, but we need to make sure we make these stages before that really well so that our final result is great. And to finish off with 1 minute left of the lecture, if you have not seen it yet, and I think most of you have at least opened it yet, I posted in the announcements last week or at the start of this week, this video here, which is a breakdown of a game asset pipeline. And this is something you guys gotta watch, because this explains to you everything from the beginning of when you're coming up with an idea all the way to the end when you're putting that final finished game object that has color and texture and maybe even animation, all that beautiful stuff in the game engine, right? And this is going to take you through every single section, explain to you what every single section is for, just so you guys have a general understanding of what we're doing, what stage we're at, and why we're doing it, right? So I do recommend watching that. If you haven't watched it yet, it's going to give you a better understanding of what you do as a game artist. And yeah, so that's everything for now. We're 1 minute over. If there's any questions, I'm going to stick around for a little bit and answer them. The main thing I want you guys to take away from what I was showing you was, generally speaking, is that the next stage after blocking out is this detailing stage, where without being too concerned about some little errors and issues that are going to happen, I want you guys to detail your asset and detail it very well. And I want you guys to have that ready, as soon as you can. I know some of you have really complex models, but I want you guys to finish your blockouts and get into detailing, and make sure you finish everything to a good quality. Don't work quick to a poor quality, but don't take forever. Just try to work smart, try to work really well and learn how to do that quickly, rather than working poorly quickly or taking forever to do something to a good standard. That's a skill you're going to learn over time. Working to a very good standard with a good, reasonable speed, All right, that's everything. I'm going to stop talking. Have a nice afternoon, and I'll stick around for questions. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.